Good morning, happy Sunday. Just gonna do a quick go live talking about a little application security. I'm gonna see who files in. Just give everybody a couple minutes. Yeah, I was I think in one of somebody's chat, and they were talking about application security from a code standpoint. I just think that's something we really don't talk about in security. We're enamored with everything else but application code, and a lot of attacks actually comes from non-secure coding. I think that's something the society's just kind of weak on. Just wanted that element. So, like I said, I don't expect a lot of people to follow in. I'm gonna pick a day and actually start doing scheduled live so people know actually when I'm gonna actually go live. So, two is I'm actually just getting the hang of going live. To be honest, it's just something I haven't really done a lot, but I'm just getting comfortable. So let's get started. Everybody knows I'm a NIST guy. I do federal compliance for a living. So let's look at the NIST documentation on the screen. If I can get it to act right today. So that's the NIST. That's the standard security families when you're doing a cybersecurity program. Since we're talking about application security, we're going to focus on system service and acquisition, SA, located right there. So when you're talking about system and acquisition, when you develop code, that is actually obviously a system and you're acquiring it. Even if you're doing it in-house or out-of-house, right? You're acquiring the system. You're making sure it has certain security requirements, support. Is all the support done in the United States? Remember, I'm talking about government level security, or you selling something to a government or state entity. So they're going to want all their development done in the United States. It's actually called CONUS, Continental United States. We want all our support and development hopefully done in the United States. Since we actually becoming more global in the United States, that's actually becoming harder and harder to do. So, but that's what we're shooting for. So, what I'm looking at right now is threat modeling. Once again, this is on SA, developer testing and evaluation. Right, so as developers, we must test and evaluate our code. So what NIST is asking us for is to do that, you have to do a threat modeling and vulnerability analysis. Right, so we're just going to read actually what NIST is expecting us to do. Requires the developer of the system component, or system service to perform a threat modeling or vulnerability analysis during development and subsequent testing and evaluation of the system component or service that. So as you develop the system, as you take it from exception, development, UAT, testing, and production, right, you should be testing security at each one of those points. What usually happens is it gets in production, then we start talking about security. Now we got to figure out, okay, do we need to do a redesign? Do we need to buy something new? Is the architecture done correctly or wrong? The further it goes down in the process, right, it's much more expensive. Right, so let's see what the discussion talks is in the NIST documentation right here. I have that highlighted. System and system components and system service may deviate significantly from the function and design specification during the requirements design and stage of system development of the lifecycle. Therefore, up-to-date threat modeling and vulnerability analysis to the system components, and system services during development prior to the delivery of critical to the effectiveness operation of these systems. Right, so once again, we need to do, for application code, a threat modeling is what threats are associated when you develop code. Right, like I said, I think people take that for granted. So I'm actually going to put the link documentations into the relative security families. Those are actually be in the description box. So cyber center person, it's a good friend of mine. She just became familiar with OWASP, right? OWASP is actually a nonprofit foundation that handles application security. So I'm actually going to click on their website right here, We're going to actually walk through what they present. So what is OWASP? I've been using OWASP probably off and on for the last probably 15 years. I used to do a lot of development when I was younger, and I'm actually starting to get back in Java development. So this is one of the organizations I use. They give a lot of free tools and things to help test your code. And they actually go through, they call them the OWASP top 10 of things they actually go through for the top 10 things that they believe is actually a problem for application security. So let's see what the foundation is about. Open Web Application Security Project focuses on, like we're talking about, web application security. It's a nonprofit foundation that works to improve the security of software or programming, including community-led open source software projects. We'll look at a few of those. Like I said, they have a lot of software tools that they give to the community. Of course, if it's open source, it's free. They have over 275 local chapters, tens of thousands of members, industry-leading education and training. Right, we're an open community dedicated to enabling organizations to conceive, develop, acquire, operate, and maintain applications that can be trusted. So that's a big thing, right? Do you trust your application? Do you trust them with your credit card? Do you trust them with your information? Right, the cool thing is there's a local chapter actually in my city. So you should go out and look at the local chapters. You can find a local chapter right there and see if there's a local chapter in your city. The cool thing is now is, and I'm starting to do that more and more, the chapters are actually doing their meetings on Zoom. So even if they're not in your city or state, I'm actually going to start going to other local chapters in city and state organizations on Zoom. So I think that's actually a slight benefit of the coronavirus. I don't want to say any benefits from this pandemic. So let's talk about the OWASP top 10. So OWASP top 10 is a standard awareness documentation for developers and web application security. It represents a broad consensus about the most critical security risks to applications. Right, so what are the OWASP top 10? Companies should adopt this document and start processing to ensure that their web application minimizes these risks. Using the OWASP top 10 is perhaps the most effective first steps towards changing software development culture within your organization. Right, so we're talking about threat modeling, mitigation control. This to me is the first threat modeling, right? So OWASP is telling you these are the top 10 attacks for a web application and also your software that happens for your company. So let's talk about the top 10. Injection flaws such as SQL, NoSQL, OS, or LDAP criteria occurs when an untrusted data set is sent to an interpreter as part of a command or query. Right, so when you query stuff in Amazon, right, it's actually querying the database. So if you could change that query statement, right, you can actually change the price of an item. You can actually change the description of an item. So those are some of the things you can be watching for. Number 2 is broken authentication. An application function related to authentication session management often implemented incorrectly, allowing attackers to compromise password keys or session tokens. So when you look at Apache, Tomcat, or IIS, when you go to log in, or if you look at the top, it usually has session ID. Can you take that session ID and replay it? Can you take that session ID and push it to another application and impersonate that user? So I'm just going to talk about the first two, and we're just going to talk about this at a high level. Sensitive data exposure, XML internal entities, broken access control, security misconfiguration, cross-site scripting, insecure deserialization, using components with known vulnerabilities, and insufficient logging and monitoring. Right, so I have this actually in the development box, in the chat box. You can actually go look at them. The last one is, if you get hacked for insufficient logging and monitoring, can you track the user? Can you track what has been stolen? Can you track what areas the user have penetrated your software? That's why insufficient logging and monitoring. So let's stay on OWASP site. So that was the OWASP top 10. They have a project called Dependency Track. See, Dependency Tracker is an intelligent supply chain component analysis, a platform that allows an organization to identify and reduce the risk from using third-party open source components. Dependency Tracker takes a unique and highly beneficial approach by leveraging capabilities of the software build material. Let's look at this short video, and we'll come back and discuss this project in OWASP. So the dependency tracker, like once again, is since you're using third-party software and you're buying software and programs, embedded inside that software is other open source software. Like I'm an Oracle guy, so when you use Oracle's web server, embedded inside that web server is an Apache instance and a Tomcat instance, right? So if there's a vulnerability in Apache or Tomcat, you need to make sure Oracle is actually getting those CVEs and get those patches applied to their web server. Right, so that means you need to understand the dependency track inside your organization to make sure those projects are getting patched. So here's some other, we're not going to look at all other projects that are in the OWASP. Mobile security testing. God, everything is mobile, right? Everything is on your phone, right? So when you're on your phone, there's certain tests that you need to do to make sure your phone is secure. Mod security core rule set. Software assurance maturity model, security knowledge framework, web security test, and Z attack proxy. Right. In future videos, we're going to actually delve in each one of those and use those open source projects to help us test our actually software we're going to develop. What's up, Kenny Kojo? So one of the other things I like to actually bring is when people talk about coding and development, the things that are actually left off of that process is the actual checks you use from your actual coding development team. So if you look online, I have, once again, it's called the STIG, Security Technology Information Guideline. This is what I give to developers to actually test. I actually highlighted some things for threat modeling. So when we do threat modeling, what threats are most prevalent for your application? What's most prevalent for your application to come through, and what should you test? Right. So let's look at a couple of these. For application development, the application must audit the execution of privileged accounts. Misuse of privileged functions, either internally or unintentional, or by unauthorized external entities that may compromise your system. So one of the things is when you do admin privileges inside your app, right, you need to be logging everything that administrator account should be doing in your application, right? The ISO basically is, in government terms, who's actually in charge of your project, must ensure there's an active vulnerability testing is performed. So each one of your applications, you need to do a vulnerability scan, figure out what vulnerability is open. If you're doing PCI, HIPAA, FERPA, they actually have specific scan codes for each one of those specific compliance. All good, Kenny Kojo. I always enjoy your those formats, man. The second one is at least one tester must be designed to test for security flows and applications into your assignment. I see a lot of big projects where they have nobody functioning actually on security. Most people, when they do testing from this organization, they do it for functionality, right? So when Facebook and them was first designed, it was done in his dorm room. He wasn't thinking about security. He was thinking about how many users he can get on, right? Because users equal money. security doesn't equal money 9 times out of 10. Security actually equals an expense, right? So usually people think of security as an afterthought. Another check is test procedures must be created at least annually, talking about the initialization shutdown to make sure your system is secure, right? So these are some high-level security checks you should give to your development staff to make sure they're actually using secure coding. And I'm actually going to bring up the spreadsheet right now. And on the spreadsheet, the secure coding, if you can't see at the bottom, but for my job and what I do when I freelance is I give the development team, that's probably why they don't like me, there's 287 checks that the development team should actually look for their secure coding, right? So we're going to look at, it's done in high, medium, and low. So we're going to actually just look at some high checks. If anybody want these checks, just reach out to me and I'll send these checks to them. If you want, I know Kenny, I know you do a lot of pen testing. So if anybody wants these checks, just reach out to them and I'll send them to you. So we're just going to look at some of the high checks. This one right, you see severity. It says high. Message protected with WS security must use timestamps with creation and expiration times. Right. So if your application is doing a web service call, there's certain web service calls. There's actually a security framework that actually goes with web services. So these are some of those. Let's get down. So this is one I like, right? The application must enforce approved authorization for logical access to information system resource in accordance with applicable access control policies, right? So what this is saying is you as an organization need policies for your security to tell your development staff, your SAs, and your DBAs how should you actually handle logging in, authorization, password length, and password complexity. A lot of small organizations don't have that. Yeah, I do a little. I don't do much in penetration testing. My job actually, I'm on the blue team side, Kenny Kojo. So my job is to use these checks to lock down the systems. So when you and your guys show up, you can't breach our system. So that makes it kind of unique. Another good one is the application must execute without accessing excessive account permissions. So when you say excessive account permission, I'm sure Kenny Kojo know this. Most developers want to run their app as admin. So when Kenny does a penetration test and gets hold of that account, he can do anything he wants on that system, right? So my job is to tell the developers, you cannot run this stuff as admin. You need to run this account what it needs. If you just insert and update, deleting in the table, that account just needs that, right? So if Kenny intercepts that account or takes it over, you can't go east and west and escalate your privileges to some higher than you need, right? But then developers get upset. Oh, it's so easy when I give admin. I'm sure, right? You don't have to test your app. Everything works, right? So my job is to get the development staff to understand we need to run everything as least privilege. If this job is to take a bank file and send it to the bank, it shouldn't be able to write to the file, update the file, edit the file. It should be able to just SFTP it, encrypt it, and send it to the bank. It shouldn't do anything extra. So if somebody gets a hold of that account, they can't open it up, they can't read it. The only thing they can do is send it, right? So that means if they got that account or that file, right, they would have to do some other things to get that file to their user or to their location to be able to attack that file, right? So least privilege is real big, but developers hate least privilege, right? Because that makes their job testing a lot harder, right? So once again, I'm not going to go through all of these. There's 287 checks for the programmers. I worked in a lot of organizations until I started working for DoD. I've never seen a lot of security checks given to the development staff. Their job was to get the functionality, get the money, make it look good, make, Facebook, you can go live and all that. But what security, Facebook used to get hacked a ton 10 years ago. I used to go to other people's account through other people's account just because I knew how to hack them, right? But now Facebook's a $1 billion company and people don't realize Facebook is doing money in Africa. If you go on Messenger, right, you can send money between each other. like it's Cash App or whatever the other movement app, right? You can move money in Facebook. A lot of people don't realize in third world countries, they use Facebook to move money, right? So now it's just not like your grandma's picture or you just IMing people. Facebook is moving money. And a lot of people don't realize this too is when you go to other sites, they say if you want to log on, use your Facebook credentials, right? Facebook is actually trying to become the active directory of the internet. What does that mean is I can use my Facebook credentials to log into other services and the apps, right? So if Facebook becomes the active directory or the credential pool for the whole internet, right? They controlling everybody's how you get in there, how do you move money, how you logging in. So I think people don't realize how much Facebook move money. I think Facebook actually applied to be a bank, right? Because they're actually moving a lot of money. But once again, there's 300 checks right here and that we would give to developers for asking them to go through. So you take these checks with the OWASP. Now we're actually focusing on locking down the development and your programming, right? And I think that's the section we usually talk about. Zero trust networks. We talk about social engineering. But if your program sucks, right, none of that matters. If I could just hack through your program or take your session ID and change it and impersonate you, your password in the clear, I see it and I can just log in as you, right? All that other security really doesn't matter, right? So I just think this is something we're a little lax on in the area of cybersecurity. So once again, since I'm a Java guy, they have PMD as a source code static analyzer. What it does is when I write code in Java, PHP, this analyzer will go through my code and it looks for certain those OWASP top 10 checks. It'll actually go through my code and look and say, okay, what vulnerabilities are in this code? What should needs to be changed? What doesn't look standard? How can we make this look uniform for the whole company? Right. So this is a code analyzer. And once again, I put that in the chat that you can use to actually go through your code and make sure your code is more reliable and more trustworthy. So I'm going to play this little short video by IBM where they actually drilling down more into the code application security standpoint. Because I think, like I said, I just don't think a lot of people realize how important your code is. Like I said, I think that's kind of the last thing we think about, last thing we take for granted, last thing we don't worry about. And for me, that's kind of one of the first things we should be worried about.
Enterprise applications can be doors into uncharted possibilities. They can lead to greater innovation, customer experiences, and even revenue streams. But they can also expose you to cyber threats. What lies beyond can depend entirely on how you get there. IBM Application Security Services are designed to put you on the right path. Our experts can help you plan, build, and run your enterprise apps securely so you can open that door with confidence. As you begin your journey, we can help you get there and help you establish best practices of DevSecOps, enable container security, and integrate security at all stages of software development lifecycle. Along the way, our solutions continuously assess your route, helping to identify and address obstructions to your success, so you can arrive at your destination prepared to address cyber attacks. It's never too early to integrate security into your software development lifecycle. Leverage the experience, tools, and practices of IBM Application Security Services as you begin your journey into a new world of possibility.
So you know what IBM is focusing on it, you know, it's very important. They got their own consultants that come out and help you do that. So the big part in there, and I think a lot of people miss, is threat modeling. We talked about that a little bit at high level when we were talking about the OWASP top 10. So once again, it's injection, broken, authentication, sensitive data exposure, right? So that's part of our threat modeling. So since Kenny's in the house, we'll talk about him. So I'm sure he has a list of things he looks for when he does his penetration test. I'm sure it's web server, app server, database, all around the network, right? So I want to lay out the things I think the penetration tests are going to try to specifically focus on in my app, and I want to make sure I have all those covered, right? That's really what I got, what threat modeling is at a high level, all right? So I'm sure me and Kenny Kojo, we're going to get online and we'll go back and forth. He'll say, these are the 10 things I'm looking for, and I need to make sure those 10 things are on my list, right? So between those 10 things, we talked about the STIGs with the 300 checks, right? So that's part of my mitigation control. So when we do red team, blue team, I know these hopefully 200-300 things I've got locked down. So hopefully I'm gonna have to make Kenny do something super duper to break my app. I know he's on that level, right? So I got to make sure I'm on the same level as he is, right? So when we talk about threat modeling, and I'm gonna put this once again, like I said, I'm a NIST guy, and this special publication 800-53R5, they give you these documents and they actually talk about, I'm gonna get to the top, guide to data-centric system threat modeling, right? So what does that data-centric threat modeling actually mean? That's actually a cool topic, right? So let's get to the abstract, right? Basic concepts of security relevant to threat modeling. It defines fundamental terminology such as what is a vulnerability, attack vectors. Because of lack of consensus of security community, right? We got to have the same version, right? 2.1, I'm just going to flow through there. What's the attack side? Basic concepts of the attack side threat modeling grouped by core terms. Vulnerability, exploit, attack vector, and threat. So remember when we were looking at the STIG, it named them like, right, what threat, high, medium, low. Then it grouped them into the threat attack vectors. That's why I like to use that as my checklist, because that's going to group those attacks together, and it's going to go through and say cross-site scripting, command injection. These are the things I need to check on my input to block that. Right? So those are the things it's going to help me walk through. Once again, exploit and attack. Like I said, I'm going to put this actually in the comment section for you, so you better download this. And I think me and CyberSecurity, CyberCenter person, she was actually talking about threat modeling, so I'm actually sending this to her. So I'm actually scroll down to the bottom, and they actually, once you do it and you do all the computation, it actually gives you a score. And I'm actually going to do a video of require strong password with strong encrypted password hash. So it says acquisition costs, annual management costs. So it gives you an actual score for that particular threat for your organization, right? So we actually have a spreadsheet, and hopefully when we go through there, like when I do a small system, because I'm used to government security, it's actually about 3,000 checks. Since Kenny's in the house, like we talked about, web server, app server, database, a load balancer, all those are attack vectors that people can get to because they're open for your website. When you go through a website, right, 446 and SSL and 80 is usually open, right? That's going to flow through your web server, your app server, and your database. So that means that attack vector is open. So we need checks on all that, right, to make sure it's locked down, to make sure even when we do red team, blue team, like I said, what things do we have locked down to make sure our app doesn't get penetrated or compromised. The other cool thing is, since that's so prevalent now, and I'm going to bring it up real quick. Since I'm going more to the cloud, we talking about the cloud as the future. Amazon actually has a thing called WAF. It's a web application firewall. And what the web application firewall does is those top 10 things we were looking at on the OWASP website. If you purchase AWS WAF's firewall, it actually is going to block that stuff for you before it actually gets to your web server. So that's the cool thing is, this has become so common now. There's tools and products to help you block that feature from actually taking over your website. We're going to actually look at a short video of a guy talking about installing the Amazon WAF. It's super long, but we're only going to look about 3 minutes of it to show you what you can purchase to actually help you with those particular problems.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar today. Today, we will be going over the AWS Web Application Firewall service. In today's webinar, we'll give you a quick overview of the service itself. We'll walk you through how you can enable and write rules on the AWS WAF. We'll walk you through the OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities and how you can use AWS WAF to mitigate those vulnerabilities. If you are interested in deep diving on some of the topics that we covered today, please feel free to read through the white paper that we published a couple of months ago. And along with the white paper, we've also made available a CloudFormation template that actually implements some of the sample rules that we talk about in the white paper. So within a matter of minutes, you can be up and running with an AWS WAF with those rules deployed for you. So let's quickly cover what the AWS WAF service is all about. AWS WAF is a web application firewall that can be deployed on either a CloudFormation, it can be deployed on CloudFront, as well as an application load balancer. It protects websites and web applications against common web exploits. It helps mitigate application availability risks, as well as provides a good security posture, as well as drives down excessive resource consumptions from things such as bad bots, scrapers, and probe attacks. At a very basic level, it's a HTTP protocol request filtering engine where you can either whitelist good users or blacklist bad signatures. It prevents attacks with recognizable request signatures. We support SQLi injection and cross-site scripting natively within the engine itself, but you're free to write additional custom rules using the flexible rule language that the AWS WAF provides. It also helps with the regulatory compliance requirements, and today AWS WAF is HIPAA and PCI DSS compliant. Before we go any further, let's try and understand what a web application firewall is and where in the spectrum of attacks does it really place itself. If you're looking at the spectrum of attacks, on the very left, we have the distributed denial of service attacks, which are mostly layer 3 and floor attacks, where the attacker uses a botnet of computers and does reflection or amplification attacks, or it could be things like the DNS reflection attacks. It could be a little more sophisticated, like the slow LORS attacks. On the very right, we have very targeted attacks. This requires the attacker to know a little bit more about the applications that you're running and also some of the platform vulnerabilities that those applications may have. In this spectrum, WAF falls somewhere in the middle. Most WAFs are layer 7 mitigation services. So it helps you mitigate layer 7 HTTP floods, for example, on the DDoS side of things. It also helps you mitigate some of the bots and prober attacks, which tend to use up resources as well as affect the availability of applications. WAF can also help with some of the targeted attacks, and that's what the main focus for today's webinar is. How can you prevent the OWASP top 10 type of attacks, such as SQLi injection, cross-site scripting, local or remote file injection attacks, and a few others.
So I'll put that in the link, but once again, see the middle where they talk about WAFs, and that's what we were talking about in the OWASP top 10. The web application firewall sits in front of the web server, and hopefully it'll catch a lot of these attacks. Even if your website is susceptible to some of these attacks, hopefully the WAF will actually block that before it actually gets to your attacks. But once again, if you have your threat modeling, you can be able to go through and say, okay, this attack I know is susceptible to my web application, so I need to make sure my web application firewall is in place to actually catch that type of an attack. So when you do your threat modeling, it tells you what's open. Then you can like I say, your WAF can actually block those particular types of attacks. And the WAF is suitable where you can actually write your own things you want to block. So if you know your website are open to other vulnerabilities, you can actually program your WAF to actually block those vulnerabilities, so they won't be able to be attacked on your website. So in future videos, we're going to delve down into the web application firewall in more detail. We're going to delve down deeper into threat modeling so we can actually come up with a number for it. So we're actually going to listen at one more video, which I thought was unique, is they're actually doing vulnerabilities like you do a credit score. Why would you do that? You need to buy, most large companies are actually buying insurance for cybersecurity attacks. So when you buy insurance for a cybersecurity attack, how do you know if you're a good driver, bad driver, or you got good security or bad security? So I thought this one was real interesting.
Cybersecurity is a vital element in the global economy. It provides the basis of trust that's needed to share information, make transactions, or create online accounts. But how do you know if companies you work with have the policies and infrastructure to properly protect your sensitive data? The FICO Cyber Risk Score delivers a concise metric that conveys how well a company manages and maintains their network security. The 3-digit Cyber Risk Score may be used for self-assessment, benchmarking, or monitoring of the risks that third parties introduce to your operations. Insurers can even use the score to underwrite and manage cyber breach policies. But before you can trust the FICO Cyber Risk Score, you'll want to know how it's derived. The answer lies in our empirical approach to data analysis and our unique use of predictive analytics. The process begins by continually gathering global enterprise risk indicators at internet scale. This includes the scanning of network assets, monitoring of IP addresses, integration of compiled data sources, and detailed evidence of previous breach incidents. Some of this data tells us about network security posture, while other metrics tell us about the maturity of an organization's network management and security policies. All of this information is used in the development of an empirical model. Next, machine learning algorithms determine which risk indicators are most highly correlated with networks that have or have not suffered a data breach. Think of it this way. Imagine if you could go back in time and look at an organization's risk factors in the months leading up to a debilitating cyber breach. You could then use those risk factors to assemble predictive models that would help forecast the likelihood of a breach at other institutions. Our approach uses data-driven empirical methods to understand correlations between conditions, behaviors, and breach outcomes. The Cyber Risk Score is not based on opinions or subjective letter grades. It's based on observed facts and the impacts on actual results. These facts are used to create the predictive models that drive the score. Since the underlying data is continually refreshed, you can collaborate with your network team and third parties to validate the assets used to create the score and make real-time changes without needing the help of an ombudsman. You can instantly focus the score on specific divisions or geographic regions of any organization. The details are transparent and configurable. You have complete control. What's more, you can share these facts with third parties and business partners you're evaluating. Whether your focus is network security, vendor management, or enterprise risk, the FICO Cyber Risk Score delivers the empirical results needed to make more informed security decisions. To learn more, visit cyberscore.fico.com.
So I thought that was super interesting, right? So now we're going to do cybersecurity like it's a credit score, which I think is needed. So when you actually talk about doing a cybersecurity program, you talk about everything: policies, procedure, incident response, disaster recovery from a management perspective, then technology, Cisco, databases, application, web server, app server, SAN, load balancers, right? Theoretically, when you put that all together, it's really one score for your organization, right? How do you score and what do you need to do to fix your score, right? If you're a credit score and you're using credit cards, got too much utilization, right? Or you got laid off, right? The credit score tells you what you need to fix to get that score up. So in cybersecurity, what do we need to fix to get your score up, right? Kenny Kojo's in the house. He's going to do penetration testing, red team, right? He's going to tell you these vulnerabilities are open on these servers, right? But that's going to be a small direct attack on that particular part of your organization, right? Is that part going to talk about the vulnerabilities that are open on your database, or is he just penetrating your web and app server and your firewalls because that's open to the outside, right? He's part of the red team. You can let him come in inside your organization, right? But what parts are he looking in as a red team, blue team, right? What's the overall score for your organization? So I think that's what we need to get to as a cybersecurity organization is what is the score for your whole organization? And in that score, what do you need to fix to get your score up? Right? Sometimes I think we get focused on this part of the app, blue team, red team, firewall, zero trust network. But what is the score for your whole overall corporation? Because there's no corporation that's 100% secure. If it's out on the internet and there's connections to it and people work from home, there's going to be vulnerabilities, somebody forget to patch, or it could be the VPN person brings out a new software upgrade and there's bugs in the upgrade that you don't even know about, right? Because sometimes they forget to test the upgrade at these products you buy, right? So there's always going to be vulnerabilities and there's always going to be a score, right? There's no perfect cybersecurity score. So I just want to come to you real quick and just go live. Thanks for coming through, Ken. I just want to go through live and just talk about some of the high level because I think we forget about application code that people actually write, right? What vulnerabilities and what is secure coding? How do you teach your developers to do secure coding, right? Then we do threat modeling. What in that code is open? And like we talked about, in the web firewall, the web application firewall, what can we buy to help protect our application, right? The cool thing is people usually buy a WAF and they just say, oh, my application's protected. I'm like, well, did you do a threat modeling of your application? What vulnerabilities are open? Did you do a vulnerability scan of your application? 9 times out of 10, they go, no, I just bought the web application firewall. I'm like, well, how do you know what it's protecting if you don't know the vulnerabilities in your app, right? And I think that's where that FICO holistic score, and I think we need to start thinking at a more strategic level. Once again, it's Professor Black Ops, Cybersecurity for the People. I call this my business version. Thanks for coming through. I appreciate it. Happy Sunday. Enjoy your football.